Dr. Terrance Farrell. Now, Dr. Terrance Farrell was appointed by Keith Christopher Rowley to the chair, the Economic Development Board, in November 2015. He resigned by January 2018 because all the recommendations he made to this clown, whose skin in he played here, were rejected, and nothing he recommended was done. And the Economic Development Board collapsed, shattered, and Rowley replaced it with Small Pin Daddy. Right? Now hear this. But then, in 2020, when election come, this same clown, who had to resign because the man who in charge of the economy was doing nothing that he said to do, still say vote PNM. Now, we in a foreign exchange crisis. And lo and behold, my Business Sunday Newsday, I have to read this Dr. Terrance Farrell saying, no Forex crisis in TNT. Now that hit me like a tassel. But what is this? This man had to be, he checked out at St. Anne's. The other day I going to pick up my daughter in school, and a P taxi stopped just by St. Anne's Hospital. And a madman jump out the taxi, you know. That way we in and gone inside the hospital. A madman take a taxi, pay money, and gone up in for treatment, yes? But we have more outside than inside. Because I tell all you, just the other day I had to go to Dominica, and I say, boy, it have a foreign exchange crisis. Let me do him ask Republic Bank for US. Let me go and ask them for some EC. So, EC, Caribbean neighbors, nobody here asking for that too much. We should have plenty of that. I need the US, I go use EC. And they give me 600 EC. And tell me, God bless you. You understand? Which is the equivalent of the same 195 US. And this man say, it's not a crisis. So let me read what Dr. Farrell say. Trinidad and Tobago is not currently experiencing a foreign exchange crisis, although there might be rationing at the commercial banks, which limits access to funds, economist Dr. Terrance Farrell has said. And then he talked about some of the reserves. He says, they have official reserves currently of about US 6.3 billion. What he didn't tell you, when Kamala left in September 2015, that was at 12.26 billion US. So Rowley half the reserves that Kamala had. He wouldn't tell you that because he's not intellectually honest. He's an intelligent, dishonest human being, okay? So he wouldn't tell you that. But then he went on to say, we also have 6.3 billion US in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. But he won't tell you that there was 7.6 billion US in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund in September 2015, and that the increase from 2010 to 2016 was approximately 700 to 900 million US per year. And therefore, in 8 years of Rowley, had he managed the economy as well as Kamala, there should have been the similar increase of 8 years at 1 billion US should be 8 billion plus 7, should be 15.6 or 16 billion US. But he come to tell you that the reserves in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund are 6.3 billion. And he said, sorry, 5.5 billion, right? He said the official reserves are 6.3 and the Heritage and Stabilization Fund was 5.5 billion. Then he goes on, and I could not understand what he's talking about. So he says, in an extreme situation, the government will probably be able to put their hands down some foreign currency deposits which are owned by statutory bodies or state enterprises. The point I am making, says Dr. Terrance Farrell here, is that the foreign exchange situation is not dire. We are not by any means in any crisis. Now understand this. This gentleman, it all has to do with what you believe is a crisis. His definition of crisis is when the government, his prime minister that he resigned from, who don't listen, arrogant and dotish, when this government is unable to access any US. That's his definition of crisis. And his simplistic, superficial argument is that based on holdings in statutory authorities, based on the official reserves, and based on the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, The government, if need be, could get US. So therefore, there is no crisis. Here the problem with that theory, those assumptions, and what it's based on. People with a heart, people who care about others, people who care about citizens will understand that a crisis exists when a business has to shut down because they cannot get US. They cannot pay suppliers. Their credit limits are gone. They have to buy cash on the dash and they can't get cash. When they need 60,000 US, they could only get 3,000. When they need 150,000 to pay creditors, to pay suppliers, they could only get 30,000. When citizens need to get 500 US to go on a holiday, they can't get it. They only getting 50 US per day and they have to go 10 days to get 500 US. This is a crisis to the individuals, to the small businesses, to the people, to the parents who have to pay for their children in university abroad, for those who have to send medicine and buy medicine for people outside. Though that is how we in the UNC, we as human beings, define a crisis. Trinidad and Tobago's foreign exchange is in crisis because you, the citizens, cannot get US. This man says, that's okay. It's okay, that's just you can't get, your businesses can't get. Massey could get to pay for Obia, but you can't get to pay for your children, your holiday. You can't get, if you had to go and make a speech in Dominica to pay hotel and buy food, you can't get EC, you can't get money. The bank's cutting down your credit card limit from 10,000 US to 2,000 US, from 20,000 US to 10,000 US, across the board. He does not find that is a crisis because in his opinion, crisis only occurs when the government, Rowley and them, cannot access foreign exchange. Now, if that doesn't tell you what PNM is about, so that's the essence of his argument. It is ridiculous. It is insensitive, it is heartless, it is puerile, it is nonsensical, it is dotishness, and it shows the kind of elitism that pervades the PNM. Because once the big boys good, once the government could get US, that's good, them good, it ain't no crisis. So when 6,000 SMEs shut down during COVID, and 3,000 more shut down after COVID, and 2,000 set to shut down next year. Those people who suffering, who losing their cars, losing their houses, can't pay their mortgage, losing their assets, bordering on homeless, cannot travel, suffering, and the businesses shut down, low self-esteem, depression, higher suicide rates. That's not a crisis for Dr. Terrance Farrell. Well, sir, I think you need to rethink, reset. Your mother could not have taught you that. You learned that somewhere along the way, probably interacting with people and rubbing shoulders with people who are heartless and senseless and wicked like Rowley. Your mother and father could have never taught you that because there is a crisis. He says, oh, there may be some rationing. Rationing of US in Trinidad and Tobago, oil and gas rich, is a crisis. It's worse than 1982, Dr. Terrance Farrell, but that's why PNM remains and why some of you all get confused, because this is an intelligent human being, very intelligent, and he will read that article and find he makes sense. So never mind all the small businesses, the single mothers, all the people who suffering, who can't pay their bills, who business shut down, who dreams are shattered, who can't get US. That is not a crisis because the government could access US if them had to pay Shell or BP or EOG or whoever they had to pay.